The bridge of the Coalition warship, eternal. Dominion hummed with quiet efficiency as Commander Thane studied the holographic display before him. The small blue planet rotated slowly in the projection, its single moon casting shadows across continents that seemed almost peaceful from this distance. Several officers from different species stood around the command table, their various forms of breathing apparatus creating a soft symphony of mechanical sounds. "Analysis complete, sir," reported Lieutenant Kreese, her forearms working simultaneously. Across multiple control panels, the insectoid officer's compound eyes reflected the blue glow of the planet's image. The dominant species calls themselves humans. They've achieved basic spaceflight within the last century, but their technology remains primitive by our standards. Thane's scaled hide shifted color slightly, a sign of amusement among his people. The reptilian commander had overseen dozens of planetary conquests over his long career, and this one promised to be among the easiest. "Show me their weapons capabilities." The hologram shifted to display crude missiles tipped with nuclear warheads, space stations that looked like metal cans held together with hope, an aircraft that still relied on chemical combustion for propulsion. Several Coalition officers exchanged what could only be described as the galactic equivalent of chuckles. "Their most advanced weapons are fusion bombs," Kreese continued, her translator rendering her clicking speech into standard Coalition tongue. "The yields are impressive for such a primitive species, but nothing our shields cannot handle. They possess approximately 15,000 such devices across their planet." 15,000. Sub-Commander Voss raised his eyebrows, his gray skin rippling with what his species considered laughter. Homeworld's children build more powerful explosives in their science classes. The gathered officers found this quite amusing. The humans had spent decades building weapons that the Coalition considered antiques. It was like watching cave dwellers threatening each other with pointed sticks while standing beneath fusion-powered starships. What about their unity? Asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Have they formed a planetary government?" "Negative, sir." Kreese manipulated the display to show political boundaries carved across the planet's surface. They remain divided into nearly 200 separate nations. Current intelligence suggests at least 47 active military conflicts across their world. They appear incapable of cooperation, even when facing common natural disasters. This was even better than Thane had hoped. Divided species would crumble at the first sign of superior force. The Coalition had learned long ago that unity was the key to any effective resistance, and these humans seemed determined to fight among themselves until the very end. "Population analysis," he inquired. "Approximately 8 billion individuals," Kreese reported. "Average lifespan of roughly 80 standard years. They mature slowly and reproduce at a moderate rate. Physical capabilities are unremarkable. They lack natural armor, poison, or any significant combat adaptations." The display showed images of humans in their natural state. They looked soft and vulnerable, their pink skin offering no protection, their single pair of eyes limiting their vision, their bipedal stance making them unstable in combat. Thane had seen more threatening creatures in children's picture books. "They do show one unusual trait," Kreese added. "Their entertainment media suggests they have an unusual fascination with violence and conflict. However, this appears to be purely fictional. Actual military forces are scattered and poorly coordinated. Orbital defenses, minimal. They possess several space stations and approximately 5,000 satellites, most for communication and observation. Their largest space-based weapons are kinetic projectiles that would barely scratch our hull plating." They nodded, satisfied. The humans had achieved just enough technology to make them useful as a labor force, but not enough to pose any real threat. Their divided nature would make conquest simple, and their soft bodies would make them ideal for mining operations in the outer systems. "Estimated conquest timeline?" he asked. "Standard doctrine suggests no more than 1 galactic week," Kreese replied confidently. "Given their primitive technology and divided loyalties, resistance should collapse within the first day. Full pacification of the planet should be complete within 72 local hours." "Excellent." Thane's hide shifted to a deep purple, indicating satisfaction. signaled the Council. Earth is approved for immediate harvesting. We'll need transport ships for approximately 8 billion new workers. The communication array crackled to life as the message was transmitted across the galaxy. Within hours, the wheels of the Coalition's vast bureaucracy began turning. Transport ships were assigned, processing facilities prepared, and work assignments distributed among the member worlds. Earth's population would be scattered across a dozen systems. It's broken up to prevent any possibility of organized resistance. 3 days later, the first phase of Operation Harvest began. Coalition ships decloaked above every major human city simultaneously, their massive forms blotting out the sun. The psychological impact was always the most effective weapon in these situations. Show the primitives the vast difference in power, and they would surrender without firing a shot. Thane stood on his bridge, watching the surface of Earth through the main view screen. The planet looked even more insignificant up close, a small world circling an unremarkable star in a backwater region of the galaxy. Soon it would be just another empty rock, its population scattered and its resources claimed by the Coalition. Begin. Transmission, he ordered. The hijacked human communication networks carried the same message to every television, radio, and computer on the planet. The words were simple and direct, translated into every human language by the Coalition's vast databases. People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Galactic Coalition. You have 72 of your hours to cease all resistance and prepare for relocation. Any attempt to fight will be met with immediate pacification. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your divided nations cannot stand against us. Your choice is simple. Surrender and live as workers in the greater galaxy, or resist and be removed by force. Transmission ended, and Thane settled back in his command chair to wait. In his experience, primitive species needed a few hours to process the reality of their situation. There would be panic, confusion, and desperate attempts at negotiation. Then, inevitably, surrender. He had conquered 47 worlds using this exact same approach. The humans would be number 48, and by far the easiest. Their own intelligence services had provided detailed information about their military capabilities, their political divisions, and their psychological profiles. Everything suggested a species that would crumble at the first sign of superior force. The countdown began. 72 hours until the humans would learn their place in the galaxy. Thane had no idea he had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. The emergency session at the United Nations had been going for 6 hours straight. Representatives from nations that had barely spoken to each other in decades now sat around the same table, sharing intelligence and resources with an urgency that would have been impossible just days before. President Maria Santos of Brazil leaned forward, her hands flat on the mahogany table. The ships are real? Our satellites confirm massive objects over every major city. Whatever these things are, they're not from Earth. General Tom Bradley from the American Joint Chiefs of Staff nodded grimly. Our best estimates put their largest vessels at over 2 kilometers in length. The technology appears to be decades ahead of anything we've developed. But not centuries, interrupted Dr. Maya Patel, who had been flown in from Mumbai just hours earlier. The quantum physicist looked exhausted but determined. I've been analyzing the energy signatures our satellites detected. Their power systems are advanced, yes, but they follow the same basic principles we understand. They're using controlled fusion, not some magical energy source. The Russian delegate, General Boris Petrov, spoke up. My government has been running war games for the last 18 hours. These aliens are telling the truth about their capabilities. Conventional resistance is suicide. Then we don't fight conventionally, said President Santos simply. Dr. Patel, what do you need? Maya had been thinking about this question since the first ships appeared. Access to every quantum research facility on the planet, every particle accelerator, every lab working on theoretical physics. And I need them connected to a single network. Done, said the British representative.
Oh, My-6 has already begun establishing secure communications with our research institutions.
What followed was something unprecedented in human history. Nations that had been enemies for generations began sharing their most classified military secrets. The Chinese uploaded their entire database of experimental weapons research. The Americans provided access to their Black Project facilities. The Russians opened their nuclear arsenals for inspection and coordination. Dr. Maya Patel found herself at the center of a global scientific effort unlike anything ever attempted. Research facilities from Tokyo to London worked around the clock, sharing data in real time. Sleep became a luxury that few could afford as the 72-hour deadline approached. On the second day, the first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lisa Chen, a young pilot in the Chinese Air Force, was running test flights with modified equipment when her aircraft's experimental radar system detected something impossible. The alien ships, massive as they were, had blind spots in their sensor coverage. "They're overconfident," she reported to her commanding officer. "Their scanning patterns assume we can't reach certain altitudes or approach from specific angles. They're not watching for threats they don't think we can pose." This information was immediately shared with every air force on the planet. Within hours, pilots from dozens of nations were comparing notes and developing new tactics. The aliens might have superior technology, but they had never faced an enemy desperate enough to exploit every possible weakness. General Bradley coordinated the global defense network from a bunker deep beneath the Pentagon. The situation was hopeless by any rational analysis, but humans had never been particularly rational when their survival was at stake. "All units, this is command." He broadcast to military forces worldwide. "We have confirmation that the enemy is not invincible. Their technology is advanced, but not magical.
Ow.
They have weaknesses, and we're going to exploit every single one." Response surprised even Bradley. Military units that should have been paralyzed by the impossible odds instead threw themselves into preparations with fierce determination. Soldiers welded metal plates onto civilian vehicles, creating improvised armored units. Engineers rigged explosives into everyday objects, turning smartphones into remote detonators and delivery trucks into massive bombs. Maya's team worked frantically in their underground laboratory, surrounded by equipment that had been airlifted from facilities around the world. The breakthrough came at 2 in the morning of the final day when her exhausted team managed to create a quantum field that interfered with the alien sensor systems. "It's crude," she explained to President Santos over the secure video link. "We're essentially creating electromagnetic noise that their systems can't filter out. It won't stop their weapons, but it might give our people a chance to get close." "How close?" Santos asked. "Close enough to hurt them." The final 12 hours were a blur of desperate activity. Every major city on Earth became a fortress as civilians, and military personnel worked side by side to prepare defenses. Old men who had lived through previous wars taught young soldiers how to make improvised explosives. Children ran messages between command posts when electronic communications failed. As the deadline approached, something remarkable happened. The divisions that had defined human politics for centuries simply dissolved. Religious leaders of different faiths stood together, offering blessings to soldiers regardless of their beliefs. Scientists shared decades of research in minutes-long conversations. Enemies became allies in the face of extinction. Lisa Chen sat in the cockpit of her modified fighter, part of a mixed squadron that included pilots from 6 different nations. Her aircraft had been equipped with Maya's quantum field generator and every explosive device the engineers could fit onto the frame. "All pilots, this is Tower," came the voice of her controller. "The 72 hours are up. Enemy forces are beginning their descent." Through her canopy, Lisa could see the massive alien ships beginning to move. Smaller craft detached from the main vessels, heading toward the surface with obvious hostile intent. "Remember," General Bradley's voice came over the international communication channel. "We're not trying to win, trying to make them pay for every inch. Make them regret they ever found us." Lisa smiled grimly as she pushed her throttle forward. Her missile systems were loaded with conventional weapons that probably couldn't penetrate alien armor. But her aircraft itself was now a guided missile, packed with enough explosives to level a city block. "This is for everyone who can't fight." "Back," she whispered, and dove toward the nearest alien landing craft. The Battle of Earth had begun. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy what desperation could accomplish. Maya watched from her bunker as the first explosions lit up the sky above major cities. The aliens had expected quick surrender. Instead, they were about to face a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and better equipped than they were. The countdown had reached 0. Now the real test would begin. Commander Thane stared at the tactical display with growing disbelief. What should have been a simple mop-up operation had turned into something he barely recognized as warfare. The primitive humans were not only fighting back, they were adapting. Faster than his analysts could update their threat assessments. "Sir, we've lost another troop transport over the North American continent," reported Lieutenant Kreese, her compound eyes flickering with what Thane had learned to recognize as anxiety. "The humans are using their civilian aircraft as guided missiles." Guided missiles. Thane's hide shifted to a darker shade of confusion. "Their pilots are committing suicide." "Affirmative, sir. We've recorded over 300 deliberate collision attacks in the last 6 hours. They're packing their aircraft with explosive materials and ramming our landing craft."
Nice.
This was beyond Thane's understanding. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species willing to throw away individual lives with such casual determination. Most civilized races valued the survival of their members above tactical advantage. These humans seemed to consider their own deaths as just another weapon to be deployed. Status of ground operations. The tactical display shifted to show surface battles raging in dozens of locations. What Thane saw defied every principle of rational warfare. Human forces were using their own infrastructure as weapons, deliberately destroying bridges while coalition forces were crossing them, collapsing buildings onto advancing troops, and turning civilian areas into death traps. "Resistance is much stronger than projected," Kreese reported. "The humans are not fighting to hold territory. They're fighting to maximize our casualties. Every building has been turned into a fortress. Every street has been trapped with explosives. They're destroying their own cities." "Yes, sir."
Oh.
"They appear to prefer complete destruction over occupation."
Ow.
Felt a chill run through his scales. This was not normal behavior for a conquered species.
Oh.
Most planets surrendered once they understood the futility of resistance. These humans seemed determined to make their world uninhabitable rather than allow the coalition to claim it. The door to the bridge slid open as Sub-Commander Voss entered, his gray skin now pale with stress. "Sir, we need to discuss the situation." "With Coalition Command." "What situation?" "The other species, sir. Word of human resistance is spreading to our subjugated populations. We're receiving reports of uprisings on 17 different worlds." Thane's blood went cold. The Coalition's power rested on the assumption that resistance was hopeless. If subject species began to believe they could fight back successfully, the entire galactic order would collapse. "Show me," he ordered. The main display changed to show a galaxy-wide tactical overview. Red indicators marked worlds where local populations had begun active resistance against coalition forces. Most were minor uprisings that could be easily suppressed, but the pattern was clear. News of Earth's refusal to surrender was inspiring. Rebellion across the galaxy. "How long until we can finish this?" Thane asked. "Unknown, sir." Kreese manipulated her controls, bringing up casualty reports. "Human resistance is actually strengthening. They're learning from each engagement and modifying their tactics. Our ground forces report that human weapons are becoming more effective. That's impossible. They have primitive technology. They're adapting our technology, sir. Salvaged equipment from destroyed coalition vehicles is being incorporated into human weapon systems. Their scientists are reverse engineering our systems in real time." The implications hit Thane like a physical blow. The humans weren't just fighting with their existing technology. They were learning and improving during combat, something that should have taken years of careful research and development. Estimated time to planetary pacification? Current projections suggest 18 months, sir. Possibly longer if they continue to adapt at their current rate. 18 months. What was supposed to be a 3-day operation had become a prolonged campaign that was inspiring rebellion across the galaxy. Thane could already imagine the emergency sessions being called on coalition worlds. The questions about his competence, the demands for results. "Signal Coalition Command," he ordered. Quest authorization for extreme measures. The Quantum Communication Array established connection with the Coalition's Central Command Station, located safely in the galactic core, the Council session. That followed would be remembered as one of the most contentious in Coalition history. Elder Korax of the Hegemony World spoke first, his mechanical voice grinding with disapproval. Commander Thane, explain how a primitive world has resisted conquest for over a month. The humans are not fighting like a civilized species, Thane replied. They're willing to accept casualties that would break any rational resistance. They're using tactics that violate every convention of warfare. You're asking for authorization to deploy planet-killer weapons against a single world? Yes, Elder. The situation has moved beyond simple conquest. If we don't end this quickly, the rebellion will spread to every subjugated world in the galaxy. The debate that followed lasted hours. Some council members argued that using extinction-class weapons against Earth would only prove that the Coalition feared a primitive species. Others pointed out that allowing the rebellion to continue would encourage uprisings everywhere. Finally, Elder Korax called for a vote. The result was narrow but decisive. Authorization granted for complete sterilization of the Sol system. 3 days later, the most powerful fleet in galactic history began converging on Earth. 12 dreadnoughts, each capable of cracking a planet's crust. 40 cruisers armed with atmospheric incinerators. Support vessels carrying enough firepower to turn a solar system into glowing debris. Thane stood on his bridge watching the massive fleet take formation around Earth. The blue planet looked so small and fragile compared to the weapons arrayed against it. Soon, this embarrassing chapter in Coalition history would be over. The humans, monitoring the approaching fleet with their primitive sensors, sent a final transmission. President Santos appeared on screens across the Coalition fleet, her face calm despite the certain death approaching her world. You came here expecting easy slaves, she said. Instead, you found something you've never encountered before. People who would rather die free than live in chains. You're about to kill us. But you'll never be able to forget us. And every species watching this will know that the mighty Coalition had to destroy an entire world because they couldn't defeat it. The transmission ended, but the words echoed through every ship in the fleet. Some Coalition officers found themselves questioning what they were about to do. Others steeled themselves for what they saw as necessary action, Commander. Thane gave the order that would change galactic history forever. All ships begin bombardment. I want that planet reduced to molten rock. The combined firepower of the Coalition fleet opened fire on Earth, unleashing destruction beyond human comprehension. But as the first energy beams reached the planet's atmosphere, something impossible happened. The humans were still fighting back. The impossible happened in the depths of the Swiss Alps, where Dr. Maya Patel's team had been working around the clock for 3 straight weeks. This Coalition planet killer beam struck Earth's atmosphere, something that violated every known law of physics occurred. The beams simply stopped. Maya, what did you do? General Bradley's voice crackled through the emergency communication system as reports flooded in from around the planet. The massive energy weapons that should have cracked Earth's crust were being absorbed by an invisible barrier surrounding the planet. I honestly don't know, Maya replied, staring at readings that made no sense. The quantum field generators shouldn't be able to handle this much energy. According to every calculation I've done, they should have burned out in microseconds. But they hadn't burned out. Instead, the hastily assembled network of quantum field generators scattered across Earth's surface had somehow synchronized into a planetary defense system that was absorbing and redirecting the Coalition's most powerful weapons. Admiral Roy Beck, commanding the human space fleet from the converted research station New Horizon, watched his tactical display with growing amazement. The fleet he commanded was a joke by galactic standards. Converted civilian vessels, search ships with mining lasers, and cargo haulers packed with nuclear weapons. Yet somehow, they were not only surviving the Coalition attack, they were fighting back effectively. All ships, this is Admiral Beck. He broadcast to his ragged fleet. I don't understand what's happening either, but we're still alive in there. Still trying to kill us. That means we keep fighting. The response came from Captain Lisa Chen, who had somehow survived her suicide attack on the D. Coalition landing craft, and was now piloting a modified cargo ship loaded with improvised weapons. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy readings. From the alien flagship, I think we hurt them." She was right. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, Commander Thane was dealing with a situation that defied all his experience. His ship's sensors were reporting that human vessels were using weapons that shouldn't exist, employing tactics that violated the laws of physics, and somehow managing to damage Coalition vessels that were supposed to be invulnerable. How are they doing this? He demanded as another explosion rocked his ship. Lieutenant Kreese worked frantically at her station, her forearms moving across controls that were showing readings she had never seen before. "Sir, the humans appear to be using our own technology against us, but they've modified it in ways that our scientists say are impossible. Show me." The tactical display revealed the truth that would haunt Coalition nightmares for generations to come. Human vessels were equipped with weapons that combined human innovation with salvaged alien technology, creating hybrid systems that worked despite being theoretically impossible. Mining lasers had been overcharged to ship-killing intensities using power systems that should have exploded. Cargo containers had been turned into guided missiles using navigation systems ripped from destroyed. Coalition fighters. Most terrifying of all were the weapons that human scientists called quantum torpedoes, devices that somehow phased through Coalition shields by exploiting a mathematical paradox that every rational physicist insisted couldn't exist. "Sir," Chris reported, her voice shaking, "we're receiving reports from across the fleet. Human forces are boarding damaged Coalition vessels." "Boarding them? How?" "They're using our own teleportation technology, sir. They figured out how to operate our matter transporters." This was the moment when Thane truly understood what the Coalition was facing. The humans weren't just fighting with their existing technology. They were learning and adapting enemy technology in real time, during active combat, while under fire. What should have taken decades of careful research and testing, they were accomplishing in hours. "Emergency transmission to Coalition Command," Thane ordered. "We're not fighting a primitive species. We're fighting something that learns faster than we can teach it." But Coalition Command was dealing with its own crisis. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy as news of the Battle of Earth spread. Subject species that had been peaceful for centuries were suddenly asking dangerous questions. Humans could fight the Coalition to a standstill. What did that say about Coalition invincibility? The breaking point came when human prisoners, captured during the initial invasion, began escaping from Coalition detention facilities. But instead of fleeing, they systematically sabotaged Coalition ships from within. Guards who had dismissed humans as weak and primitive found themselves facing opponents who had studied alien technology during their captivity and learned to use it against their captors. Dr. Maya Patel, still coordinating Earth's defenses from her underground laboratory, received a report that changed everything. "Maya, this is incredible," came the voice of Dr. Hans Weber from the European Research Facility. "The quantum field isn't just protecting us. It's learning. Each time the aliens modify their attack patterns, the field adapts automatically." "That's impossible," Maya replied. "The quantum generators aren't programmed for adaptive response." "No, but the field is acting like a living system. It's anticipating attacks and modifying its defensive patterns in real time." Maya stared at her instruments, trying to understand what was happening. The network of quantum field generators should have been a crude defensive system. It's barely functional and certainly not capable of the complex responses they were observing. Then the truth hit her. The system wasn't just combining human technology with alien science. It was combining human intuition with alien logic, creating something that was greater than the sum of its parts. "General Bradley," she called over the communication system, "I need you to coordinate a global attack pattern. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. I think I know how to end this. What do you need? Trust me and do exactly what I tell." What followed was the most coordinated military action in human history. Every human fighter pilot, every naval vessel, every ground-based weapon system responded to Maya's commands with perfect synchronization. It was as if the entire species had become a single organism focused on a single goal: survival, the Coalition. Fleet found itself facing an enemy that no longer made sense. Human attacks came from impossible angles, using weapons that violated physical laws, coordinated with precision that their communication systems couldn't explain. Commander Thane watched his mighty fleet being systematically destroyed by converted cargo ships and civilian vessels. The flagship that had conquered 47 worlds was being torn apart by opponents who had barely achieved spaceflight. All ships, he broadcast to the remnants of his fleet, retreat to minimum safe distance. As the Coalition forces pulled back, Commander Thane sent his final report to Coalition Command. We have encountered something beyond our understanding. The humans don't just fight to win, they fight to ensure their enemies can never threaten anyone again. We gave them a reason to unite, and now they're stronger than any force we can bring against them. The Battle of Earth was over. The Coalition had lost. And across the galaxy, every subjugated species was learning that the supposedly invincible overlords could be defeated. The humans had won. But more importantly, they had proven that freedom was worth fighting for. 6 months after the Coalition fleet retreated from Earth in defeat, Captain Roy Martinez stood on the bridge of the Defiance, humanity's first purpose-built warship. The vessel was a perfect example of what humans had become in their crucible. A fire, a hybrid of salvaged alien technology and human innovation that should have been impossible but worked better than anything the galaxy had seen before. Captain, we're approaching Coalition space, reported his communications officer. Maria Santos, the former president of Brazil, who had refused to abandon her military commission even after the war ended. Proxima Station is broadcasting surrender codes. Roy smiled grimly. The Coalition's regional headquarters was surrendering before the human fleet even came within weapons range. It had been the same story at every Coalition outpost they had encountered. The mighty Galactic Empire was collapsing from within, torn apart by rebellions that Earth's example had inspired. Open a channel to all ships, Roy ordered, says Admiral Martinez to all human vessels. Remember, we're not conquerors, we're liberators. Every species we free becomes an ally, not a subject. The human fleet that approached Proxima Station bore little resemblance to the desperate defense force that had fought at Earth. These were ships designed by Dr. Maya Patel's expanded research teams. Vessels that combined the best of human adaptability with alien technology. They moved with deadly grace. Their hybrid weapon systems capable of penetrating any known defense. But more importantly, they carried something the galaxy had almost forgotten. Hope. The first species the humans liberated were the Kalari, peaceful race that had been enslaved by the Coalition for over 3 centuries. When the human fleet arrived at their homeworld, the planetary governor's first act was to execute the Coalition garrison and declare independence. Why, the governor asked. Captain Lisa Chen, during the liberation ceremony. Why did you come to help us? What do you gain from our freedom? Lisa, now commanding her own ship after surviving impossible odds at Earth, gave the answer that would echo across the galaxy. Because no one should live in chains. Because freedom is something worth fighting for and worth sharing. The psychological impact was devastating to the Coalition. Within weeks of the Kalari liberation, 17 more worlds declared independence. The galactic communication networks carried stories of human fleets appearing wherever Coalition forces tried to suppress rebellions, always arriving just in time to tip the balance toward freedom. Commander Thane, now facing court-martial for his role in what Coalition historians called the Earth disaster, delivered his final testimony to a military tribunal that was rapidly becoming irrelevant. The Coalition government was dissolving as member species withdrew their support and subject races declared independence. We created our own worst enemy, he told the assembled officers. We took a divided species and gave them a reason to unite. We took a peaceful people and taught them how to fight. We took a planet full of different cultures and forged them into the galaxy's greatest liberating force. The tribunal's verdict was almost meaningless. The Coalition no longer had the power to enforce military justice, and Thane himself had become something of a celebrity among freed worlds, the officer whose mistake had triggered galactic liberation. Dr. Maya Patel, now Earth's chief science advisor, stood before the first assembly of the Free Worlds Alliance. Representatives from 47 liberated Species filled the great hall that had been constructed from salvaged coalition materials. Her quantum field generators had been refined and shared with every world that wanted them, creating a defensive network that spanned half the galaxy. 6 months ago, we were alone and facing extinction, she addressed the assembly. Today we stand together as free peoples, united not by conquest, but by choice. The coalition taught us that unity through force creates only temporary submission. True strength comes from unity through shared values. The alliance that formed around Earth was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, instead of a central authority demanding tribute and obedience. It was a voluntary association of independent worlds that had chosen to work together. Each species contributed what they could and received what they needed. The former coalition worlds found themselves isolated and increasingly desperate. Their war machine had been designed to suppress rebellions, not fight a peer adversary backed by a galactic alliance. Worse, their own populations were beginning to question why they were fighting to preserve a system that offered them nothing but the right to oppress others. President Santos, who had been elected as the first leader of the Free Worlds Alliance, delivered what would become known as the Freedom Address from the steps of the United Nations. Building in New York, her words were broadcast to every world in the galaxy. The coalition believed that might makes right, she said. They believed that superior technology gave them the right to enslave others. They believed that unity could only be achieved through force. They were wrong on every count. The holographic display behind her showed the current state of the galaxy, vast regions now colored in the blue of the Free Worlds Alliance. While the coalition's territory had shrunk to a handful of core systems, we didn't defeat the coalition through superior firepower, Santos continued. We defeated them by proving that freedom is contagious. Every liberated world becomes a beacon of hope for others. Every successful rebellion proves that tyrants can be overthrown. The final confrontation came not through battle, but through simple economic collapse. The coalition's economy had been built on slave labor and tribute from conquered worlds. As their territory shrank, their ability to maintain their military and bureaucracy collapsed with it. The last coalition stronghold surrendered without firing. A shot when its own population rose up and demanded to join the Free Worlds Alliance. The planetary governor who had once ordered the execution of rebels was himself arrested by his former subjects, Roy Martinez. Now commanding the combined Free Worlds fleet, received the formal surrender aboard his flagship. The coalition's supreme commander, Elder Corax, signed the documents that officially dissolved the galactic empire that had ruled for over a millennium. Corax asked as he handed over the surrender documents, "How did a primitive species destroy everything we built?" Roy considered the question carefully before answering. "You made the same mistake that every tyrant makes. You assumed that being powerful made you right. You forgot that people will endure almost anything except being told they don't deserve to be free." The ceremony concluded with Corax and the remaining coalition leadership being transported to a neutral world where they would stand trial for crimes against galactic civilization. The trials would be fair, conducted according to laws written by the species they had once oppressed. As Roy watched the former coalition fleet being escorted away by Free World's vessels, he reflected on how much had changed. Humanity had gone from barely achieving spaceflight to leading a galactic alliance in less than a year. But more importantly, they had proven that David could defeat Goliath if David was willing to fight for something worth dying for. Dr. Maya Patel's final report on the war was delivered to the Alliance's Science Council. Her conclusions would be studied for generations to come. "The Coalition's greatest weakness was their belief in their own propaganda," she wrote. "They convinced themselves that their superior technology made victory inevitable. They never considered that determination and adaptability could overcome raw power. The galaxy was free, but the work was just beginning. Rebuilding worlds devastated by centuries of oppression, establishing new governments based on consent rather than force, and creating economic systems that benefited everyone rather than just the rulers. But as President Santos often said in her speeches, it was work worth doing. The children of Earth now played in parks built from the ruins of coalition command centers. Schools taught courses in galactic history that included the Liberation Wars as a turning point when oppression gave way to freedom. Museums displayed artifacts from the brief but decisive conflict that had changed everything. Captain Lisa Chen, now an admiral in the Free World's fleet, often visited the memorial erected where her first desperate attack had begun. The monument bore the names of every human who had died defending their world. But the inscription spoke to something larger. They died so that freedom might live. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through the ages. Power without justice was merely tyranny waiting to fall. Technology without wisdom was just a tool for oppression. But courage in defense of freedom could overcome any odds. Commander Thane, now living quietly on a liberated world where former enemies had become neighbors, spent his retirement writing memoirs that would become required reading in Alliance military academies. His final chapter contained a warning that every generation would need to remember: we thought we were conquering primitives. Instead, we awakened something that had been sleeping in the human spirit. We gave them a cause worth dying for, and they taught the galaxy that some things are worth living for. The coalition was gone, broken not by superior firepower, but by the simple truth that free people would always fight harder than slaves. In its place stood something new, an alliance built on consent, cooperation, and the radical idea that every intelligent species deserved to determine its own destiny. Earth children would grow up in a galaxy where freedom was not a gift to be granted by the powerful, but a right to be defended by the brave. And somewhere in the vast darkness, between the stars, other species facing their own oppressors would remember the story of the small blue planet that refused to surrender. The humans had kept their promise. They had made sure that the coalition would never threaten anyone again. And in doing so, they had given the galaxy something precious. Proof that tyranny was not inevitable. That the strong did not have the right to rule the weak. And that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really did win. The war was over. The galaxy was free. And humanity had learned that their greatest strength was not their adaptability, or their stubbornness, or their refusal to surrender. It was their absolute belief that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the odds the coalition had provoked. Earth expecting easy conquest. Instead, they had taught humanity to be liberators. Now the galaxy would never be the same.